We're incredibly grateful for your support. Before we begin today's tale, tell us, which city or country are you joining us from? We love connecting with our global audience. Now, let's dive into today's story. Wade Thorne straightened his tie and examined his reflection in the mirror. The face staring back at him belonged to a simple accountant, graying at the temples, reading glasses perched on his nose, the epitome of suburban normalcy. No one would guess this man once crawled through jungle mud with a knife between his teeth, teaching America's most elite soldiers how to vanish and survive in the most hostile environments on Earth. He preferred it that way. "Dad, have you seen my biology textbook?" Zoe called from downstairs. Her voice had an edge to it lately, sharper than a typical teenage attitude. "Check under the couch," Wade replied, adjusting his cuffs. "That's where I found your history book yesterday." The doorbell rang as Wade descended the stairs. Brooke rushed past him, camera bag slung over her shoulder. "That's my ride to the airport," she said, barely making eye contact. "The Yellowstone client wants sunrise shots, so we're flying out tonight." "Another weekend trip?" Wade asked, keeping his voice neutral. "That's 3 this month." Brooke paused at the door. "It's work, Wade. You know how important these commissions are." "I know." He leaned in to kiss her cheek, but she turned, offering only her cheek. "When will you be back?" "Sunday night, maybe Monday morning." She checked her phone. "I've got to go. Love you." The door closed before he could respond. Wade stood motionless, listening to the car pull away. Through the window, he caught a glimpse of the driver. Not the usual airport shuttle, but a black Range Rover with tinted windows. In the kitchen, Zoe slammed her textbook shut. "She's gone again?" "Work trip," Wade said automatically. Zoe rolled her eyes. "Right. Work. What's that supposed to mean?" His daughter's face closed off. "Nothing. I got homework." Later that night, while cleaning the bathroom, Wade found an unfamiliar bottle of cologne tucked behind his shaving cream. The scent was woody, expensive, not something he would wear. He placed it back exactly as he found it, his mind calculating possibilities. The next day at Thorne Accounting Services, Hammond Reeves sat across from Wade's desk, sliding over a folder of documents. "The Conservation Foundation needs these returns filed by next month," the wildlife officer said. "We've had some unusual funding come in after that feature on mountain lion protection." Wade nodded, scanning the paperwork. "I'll take care of it." "Say," Reeves leaned forward, "I heard your wife's been working with Logan Blackwood on that wildlife photography series." "Small world, huh?" Wade kept his expression neutral. "Logan Blackwood? Yeah, the hunting outfitter. Big operation up north. Supposedly doing some conservation partnership now." Reeves shrugged. "Surprising, given his reputation, but good publicity for him, I guess." "I wasn't aware of the connection," Wade said carefully. "Brooke hasn't mentioned him." That evening, Wade sat alone in his home office, the blue light of his computer screen illuminating his face as he scrolled through Logan Blackwood's online presence. Wealthy, charismatic, with a string of high-end outfitting lodges across the Rockies. Wade dug deeper. 2 previous marriages, both ended by tragedy. First wife, house fire while Logan was conveniently out of town. Second wife, boating accident during storm. Both incidents investigated, Logan cleared, both resulting in substantial insurance payouts. Wade closed his laptop and sat in darkness. 10 years of civilian life had dulled some instincts, but not all. Something was wrong in his home, and the soldier he'd spent a decade suppressing was waking up. "A camping trip?" Wade repeated, fork paused halfway to his mouth. "You hate camping." Brooks smiled across the dinner table. "I thought it would be nice. For our anniversary. Remember how we used to go before? Before the nightmares. Before Wade woke up screaming from dreams of blood and jungle. Before he left that life behind." "It's been years," Wade said carefully. "Exactly. Zoe's never really experienced it. And I found this amazing spot in Wyoming. Very remote, beautiful views." Brooke reached for his hand. "I've already started packing. It'll be good for us." Later that week, Wade installed the home security system while Brooke was at her studio. "Just a precaution," he explained when she returned. "There was a break-in 3 streets over." She nodded, not questioning his sudden concern for home security. The first alert came to his phone 2 days later. "Motion detected. Front door, 2:14 p.m. Wade watched the footage from his office downtown. A tall man with a hunter's build strode confidently to the door. Brooke answered wearing a silk robe, her hair wet from a shower. The man didn't leave until 4:47 p.m. That night, Wade pretended to sleep while Brooke texted beside him, the blue glow illuminating her smile. At 2 a.m., he slipped from bed and checked her laptop, still open on the kitchen counter. Recent searches. Fatal bear attacks, Wyoming. Undetectable poisons. Wilderness accidents forensics. Life insurance payout, spouse, suspicious death. Wade closed the laptop gently, something cold and familiar settling in his chest. The next morning, he followed Brooke to a downtown cafe where she met with a balding man in an expensive suit. Wade sat 2 tables away, baseball cap pulled low, newspaper raised. The revisal looks excellent, Martin, Brooke was saying. And the signature? Perfect match to the samples you provided. No one would question it. Wade ordered coffee, keeping his face hidden. That evening, Brooke presented him with a wrapped box at dinner. Just because, she said, watching eagerly as he opened it. Inside was an expensive watch. Wade turned it over, reading the inscription, "Forever yours be." "It's beautiful," he said, sliding it onto his wrist. "Thank you." Zoe picked at her food, unusually quiet. After dinner, Wade found her sitting on the back porch steps, arms wrapped around her knees. "Hey kiddo, what's going on? You've been quiet lately." Zoe stared at the darkening yard. "Nothing. I don't believe that. Talk to me." Her face crumpled, tears forming. "I can't." "Yes, you can. Whatever it is." She looked around frantically, then whispered, "He said he'd hurt me if I told you." "Who said that?" Wade's voice was deadly calm. "Mom's friend. Logan." The words tumbled out between sobs. "I heard them talking when you were at work last week. They're going to do something to you on the camping trip. Make it look like a bear attack. Mom's been practicing your signature for some new will. Logan said he knows how to make it look like an accident." Wade pulled his daughter close, his mind already shifting into operational mode. "Listen carefully, Zoe. You did the right thing telling me. I'm going to handle this, but I need you to act normal around your mother. Can you do that?" She nodded against his chest. "One more thing," Wade said. "Did you ever tell him about my previous job? What I did before becoming an accountant?" "No," Zoe whispered. "You always said that was private family stuff." Wade nodded. "Good. That's good." The phone rang 5 times before Diego answered. "Wade Thorne." Diego's voice was thick with sleep. "It's been what, 4 years? I need information, Diego." "Off the books." Silence, then. "You know I'm private sector now. That's why I'm calling. I need everything you can find on Logan Blackwood. Hunting outfitter, Wyoming-based. This business or personal?" Wade hesitated. "Personal. Family matter." The line went quiet. Diego Reyes had been with Wade in Brazil when everything went wrong. He understood what family matter meant. "Give me 48 hours, Diego said finally. 2 days later, Wade sat in his garage, phone pressed to his ear. Surrounded by dusty camping gear, he'd begun to organize. "He's not just a hunter, Wade." Diego's voice was grim. "Blackwood was private military for years. South America, Africa, places with loose regulations on wildlife trade. He's got a pattern. Wealthy women whose husbands die in convenient accidents. Before that, he was in Colombia around the same time we were there." Wade's fingers tightened on the phone. "The op that went bad." "Can't confirm, but the timeline fits. There's more. He's been investigated 3 times for suspicious deaths. Always cleared, but the investigators noted irregularities. Anything current?" Wildlife officer named Hammond Reeves has been building a case against Blackwood for poaching endangered species. "Nothing solid yet." Wade hung up and unlocked the gun, safe hidden behind his workbench. Inside lay reminders of his previous life. Tactical knife, specialized compass, a field manual he'd written himself. Under a false bottom, a Glock 19, maintained perfectly despite years of disuse. Before dawn the next morning, Wade ran 5 miles through forest trails behind his neighborhood, timing himself. By the 3rd day, he'd shaved 2 minutes off his time. By the 5th day, he'd added a 40-pound pack. Dr. Amara Wilson's office hadn't changed in the years since Wade had been a patient. She looked up from her desk, surprised. "Wade, this is unexpected." He sat across from her. I need to talk about Brazil. She set down her pen. We processed that trauma years ago. Did we? Or did I just learn to bury it? Wade leaned forward. What if I told you I might need to be that person again? The person I was before. Her expression darkened. Is your family in danger? Yes. From whom? My wife. Dr. Wilson's professional composure slipped momentarily. Tell me everything. After hearing the full story, she sat silently for a long moment. Wade, if what you're saying is true, go to the police. With what proof? Suspicious searches? Overheard conversations? He shook his head. I need to catch them in the act. And then what? The man I treated after Brazil was haunted by the things he'd done in the name of survival. Is that who you want Zoe to see? I want Zoe to see her father alive. Wade met with his lawyer the next day, updating his will to ensure Zoe would be placed with his sister if anything happened to him. Afterward, he recorded a video detailing everything he discovered, encrypted it, and sent it to Diego with specific instructions. Release if I don't return from Wyoming. The final piece came together when Hammond Reeves appeared at Wade's office unannounced. These were taken at Blackwood's hunting grounds last month, Reeves said, spreading photos across the desk. They showed carcasses of mountain lions and wolves, protected species, stacked in a storage shed. Why show me? Wade asked. Because your wife's name appeared in some paperwork related to Shell companies financing Blackwood's operation. Probably means nothing, but Reeves shrugged. Thought you should know. Wade studied the photos carefully. And if someone wanted to find this location? Reeves raised an eyebrow. It's on private land, 20 miles west of your planned camping site. Not that I've been looking at your permit application or anything. Their eyes met in silent understanding. Be careful in those woods, Thorne. All kinds of predators out there. The Jeep Cherokee wound through mountain roads, Brooke navigating from the passenger seat, while Zoe sat silently in the back. Through the rearview mirror, Wade spotted a black Range Rover 3 cars behind, maintaining consistent distance. You're quiet today, Brooke noted, touching Wade's arm. Just focus on the road, he replied. It's been a while since I've driven these mountain passes. Well, it's going to be amazing. Family bonding in nature. She squeezed his arm. I packed your favorite whiskey. Wade smiled. How thoughtful. The campsite was remote, accessible only by a narrow dirt road that crossed 2 streams. Wade deliberately drove slowly, noting landmarks, calculating distances, mapping the terrain in his mind. As they set up camp, Wade positioned their tent with clear sight lines to all approaches. He scattered dry twigs in strategic locations, natural alarms that would snap underfoot. While gathering firewood, he quietly placed emergency packs at 3 different locations within a half-mile radius. Need help with that tent, babe? Brooke called. Got it, Wade replied, hammering stakes with more force than necessary. By late afternoon, they had a fire going and camp established. Zoe had relaxed somewhat, even smiled when Wade showed her how to skip stones across the nearby lake. The sound of an approaching vehicle made Wade tense. The black Range Rover appeared on the dirt road, parking 50 yards from their site. Logan Blackwood emerged, all outdoor swagger and expensive gear. Well, would you look at that? He called, approaching their camp. If it isn't the Thorns. Brooke's surprise was overdone, her hand flying to her chest. Logan, what a coincidence. Wade extended his hand. You must be the famous Logan Blackwood. Brooks mentioned your photography collaboration. Logan's grip was firm, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. All good things, I hope. I was just heading to my usual spot when I recognized Brooks' car. Why don't you join us? Wade suggested. No sense camping alone when there's plenty of space. The momentary flash of confusion in both Brooke and Logan's eyes was worth the uncomfortable arrangements Wade had just created. That's really kind, Logan said, recovering quickly. If you're sure I'm not intruding. Not at all, Wade insisted. Any friend of Brooks is welcome. That evening around the campfire, Logan held court with stories of dangerous hunts and remote expeditions. Wade played his role, impressed, slightly intimidated, pouring himself generous glasses of whiskey while actually emptying most into the ground beside his chair. Another round? Brooke offered, holding up the bottle. Don't mind if I do, Wade slurred, weaving slightly as he held out his cup. As the fire died down, Wade stumbled to their tent, making a show of collapsing onto his sleeping bag. Through a small slit he'd made in the tent fabric, he watched Brooke slip away 15 minutes later. She met Logan by the lake, their hushed voices just audible to Wade's trained ear. "He's out cold," Brooke whispered. "3 more glasses than he usually handles." "Perfect," Logan replied. "Tomorrow we take him on that ridge trail. I've scouted it. Perfect spot near the top. Looks like a bear feeding ground. And the backpack? Already taken care of. Straps will snap right when he's on the narrow section." Logan pressed something into Brooke's hand, a small vial. Plan B, just in case. 2 drops in his coffee, no taste. Causes disorientation, then unconsciousness. After that, arranging an accident is simple. Brooke hesitated. "We're really doing this?" Logan cupped her face. Cold feet. "No, just making sure it looks natural." "Trust me," Logan said. "By this time tomorrow, you'll be a grieving widow with a very sympathetic friend to lean on." 6 months later, we're living on an island with $5 million. They embraced, silhouettes merging against the moonlit lake. In the tent, Wade silently tested the stitching he'd reinforced on his own backpack while reviewing topographical maps of the area in his mind. Morning broke with the smell of coffee and bacon. Wade emerged from the tent, rubbing his eyes and groaning. "Rough night?" Logan asked cheerfully, already dressed in hiking gear. "My head is killing me," Wade mumbled. "Too much whiskey." Brooke handed him a steaming mug. "Coffee will help. Black, the way you like it." Wade accepted it gratefully. "Thanks, hon." When Brooke turned to help Zoe with breakfast, Wade swapped his mug with another camper's empty one sitting nearby. Minutes later, he filled it with fresh coffee from the pot. After breakfast, Logan announced, "I know this amazing viewpoint about 3 miles from here. Not on any tourist maps, best panorama in the state." "Sounds great," Wade said, checking his backpack straps with exaggerated care. He'd noticed the partial cuts immediately, but had reinforced them underneath with thin steel wire, invisible unless closely inspected. "Dad, I don't feel like hiking," Zoe said quietly. Wade knelt beside her. "It's okay, kiddo. You can stay at camp with that nice family next door." He nodded toward a middle-aged couple with 2 young boys who had set up nearby. Already asked if they'd mind. The look of relief on Zoe's face was heartbreaking. The trail started easy enough, but Logan soon veered off onto a game path. "Shortcut," he explained, pushing through dense underbrush. Wade noted small markers on trees, colored tape, barely visible unless you knew to look. The terrain grew steeper, the path narrower. Logan led confidently, Brooke followed, and Wade brought up the rear, cataloging every landmark and maintaining perfect awareness of their position relative to camp. 2 hours in, they reached a ridge with a treacherous section, a narrow ledge with a 60-foot drop to jagged rocks below. Logan crossed first, then Brooke, both moving carefully along the 3-foot-wide path. "Take it slow," Logan called as Wade started to cross. "Those rocks can be loose." Halfway across, Wade felt his backpack shift. The compromised straps groaned under tension. He made a show of stumbling, arms flailing, the pack slipping off one shoulder. "Wait!" Brooke's cry sounded genuinely alarmed. Wade caught himself on a tree root, hanging momentarily over the drop before pulling himself back to safety. "Jesus," he gasped. "My pack strap broke." Logan helped him up, disappointment flickering behind his concerned expression. "Lucky catch. That would have been a nasty fall." They continued to a clearing where Logan suggested they rest. Wade sat heavily, hand pressed to his stomach. "You okay, babe?" Brooke asked. "Not really," Wade grimaced. "Something's not right." "My stomach." On cue, shouting erupted from down the trail. The camper who had unknowingly drunk from Wade's original coffee mug stumbled into the clearing, pale and disoriented. "Help!" the man gasped. "Sick, dizzy." Logan and Brooke exchanged alarmed glances as the man collapsed. 2 other hikers appeared behind him. "We need to get him back to camp," one said urgently. "He just started getting sick about an hour ago." The unexpected development fractured the group. Most headed back to camp with the sick hiker, but Brooke insisted on staying with Wade, who was now performing his own symptoms flawlessly. "I'll help get them back," Logan said. I know a shortcut. As the group departed, Wade slouched against a tree, watching through half-closed eyes as Logan whispered to Brooke, Plan B, tonight. No more delays. Dark clouds gathered as the afternoon progressed. What began as distant rumbles grew into threatening thunderheads. The storm hit suddenly, sheets of rain driven by howling wind. We need shelter, Brooke shouted over the deluge. There's a cave system about half a mile north, Wade responded, abandoning his sick act as lightning cracked overhead. I saw it on the trail map. They ran through the downpour, reaching the cave entrance just as hail began to fall. Inside, they found dry ground and shelter from the wind. How did you know this was here? Brooke asked, wringing water from her hair. Boy Scout training, Wade replied, removing his soaked jacket. Always study the terrain before a hike. While Brooke tried unsuccessfully to get cell reception deeper in the cave, Wade slipped out briefly. He returned 20 minutes later with dry kindling from a protected hollow he'd spotted earlier. Found something else out there, he said casually, building a small fire. Interesting cache about 50 yards east. Hunting knife, rope, what looked like bear bait. Strange thing to find in a national forest, don't you think? Brooke's face drained of color. Maybe a hunter left it. Maybe. Wade fed the fire. Though it was wrapped in the same orange tape Logan's been using to mark his shortcut trail. The cave fell silent except for the crackling fire and driving rain outside. Wade, Stop. His voice was soft, but carried such authority that Brooke froze. I know everything, Brooke. The affair. The insurance policy. The will with my forged signature. The plan for tomorrow. You're imagining things, she whispered. Wade pulled out his phone, played a recording. By this time tomorrow, you'll be a grieving widow with a very sympathetic friend. Tears welled in Brooke's eyes. I can explain. Can you explain why you wanted me dead? Why you were willing to orphan our daughter? You were never there, she burst out. Even when you were physically present, you were gone. Years of secrets, nightmares you wouldn't talk about. I married a ghost. So you decided to make me one. The snap of a twig alerted them to Logan's return. He stood in the cave entrance, rain dripping from his expensive waterproof gear. Storm's getting worse, he announced. We'll have to spend the night here. Wade smiled coldly. Perfect. We were just getting to the interesting part of the conversation. Logan's demeanor shifted instantly, all pretense falling away as he registered Wade's expression and Brooke's tear-streaked face. Had a little chat while I was gone, did we? His voice was different now, harder, more clipped. We did. Wade stood slowly. About insurance policies, forged signatures, and staged accidents. Logan's hand moved toward his jacket pocket. Wade shook his head. I wouldn't. Whatever you're reaching for, I guarantee I can reach you first. You're an accountant, Logan scoffed, though his hand stilled. Am I? Wade's stance shifted subtly. Weight balanced, hands relaxed but ready. You sure about that? Recognition dawned in Logan's eyes. Wait, Thorne, Brazil 2013. You were that training officer. Wade's expression remained neutral. You seem to know more about me than my wife does. Holy shit, Logan breathed. They said you dropped off the grid after that clusterfuck operation. Became a civilian. I did. Wade glanced at Brooke, whose confusion was evident. But not because I had to, because I chose to. A thunderous crash interrupted them. The sound of rushing water followed by splintering wood. Flash flood, Wade said, moving to the cave entrance. Outside, the narrow valley below had transformed into a raging river, uprooting trees and dragging debris downstream. Our way back to camp, Logan said, staring at the devastation. It's gone. And your hidden supplies, Wade added. The ones by the creek with the extra ammunition and bear scent. Those are gone too. Logan's head snapped toward Wade. How did you? I found them this morning while you were busy explaining your murder plan to my wife. Wade turned back to the cave. We're cut off for now. No choice but to wait out. The fragile alliance forged by survival necessity created an eerie calm as they gathered wood for the night. Wade allowed Logan to keep his knife, but stayed vigilantly aware of his movements. As darkness fell, the reality of their situation became clearer. The storm had destroyed the main trail back to camp. They had limited supplies and were far from any marked paths. "Nobody knows we're here," Brooks said, huddled against the cave wall. "The official trail is miles south." "Zoe knows," Wade replied. "She knows exactly where we were heading." Hours later, with Brooke finally asleep from exhaustion, Logan approached Wade by the dying fire. "You and I should talk," he said quietly. Man to man. Wade remained silent, waiting. "This doesn't have to end badly for either of us," Logan continued. "Your wife was the driving force, not me. She came to me with the plan, the insurance details, everything. Is that what you told the other husbands? Before they died in accidents?" Logan smiled thinly. "I'm a businessman, Thorne. I saw an opportunity with a desperate woman." "And the other wives?" "The ones who died in house fires and boating accidents. Unfortunate coincidences. Like the coincidence of you being in Colombia when my team was compromised. When 2 of my men died because someone sold intel about our position." A flicker of recognition crossed Logan's face, quickly masked. "Ancient history," he waved dismissively. "Here's my offer. Help me walk out of here. We split the insurance money, and Brooke takes the fall. She keeps her life, loses everything else. You and your daughter start fresh. Win-win." Wade stared into the embers. "Tell me about the others." "All of them." Logan hesitated, then began talking. The cabin fire that looked like an electrical fault. The boating accident, where he'd drilled small holes below the waterline before a storm. The hiking mishap where a safety harness had been secretly damaged. As he spoke, Wade remained motionless, his breathing steady. When Logan finished, he nodded once. "Thanks for confirming what I needed to know." Wade moved with shocking speed, one hand clamping over Logan's mouth while the other applied precise pressure to his carotid artery. Logan struggled briefly before unconsciousness took him. "You always did talk too much," Wade murmured, binding Logan's hands with paracord from his pack. Brooke woke to find Logan bound against the cave wall, still unconscious, and Wade calmly brewing coffee over a small fire. "What have you done?" she gasped. "Made breakfast," Wade replied, pouring steaming liquid into a metal cup. "Coffee. Wade, this is kidnapping." "Technically, it's citizen's arrest. He confessed to multiple murders last night." Brooke scrambled to her feet. "You're insane. I'm leaving." "To where?" "The camp's cut off by the flood, the trail's gone, and you have no idea where we actually are." Wade sipped his coffee. "But please, go ahead." She stepped toward the cave entrance, then faltered, realizing the truth of his words. "What are you going to do to us?" she asked quietly. "Nothing like what you planned for me." Wade set down his cup. "You wanted me to disappear in these woods. Instead, it's going to be both of you. You're going to kill us?" Wade looked genuinely offended. "No, Brooke, I'm not a murderer. Unlike your boyfriend." Logan stirred, groaning as consciousness returned. He tested his restraints, then glared at Wade. "This changes nothing," he growled. "You still have no proof of anything." Wade held up a satellite phone. "This yours?" "Found it in your jacket. Impressive range, military grade. Wonder why you told Brooke your phone had no reception." He pressed a button, and Logan's voice filled the cave. The cabin fire that looked like an electrical fault. Wade had recorded the entire confession. "Now, here's what happens next." Wade continued, all business. "We're going to make our way to higher ground, where this phone will get better reception. Then I'm calling my friend Diego. After that, we create a new narrative." Over the next hour, Wade outlined his plan. He would fabricate evidence suggesting all 3 of them had been swept away by the flood. Meanwhile, they would actually traverse a different route that would eventually bring them back to civilization, but not before Wade had completely controlled the narrative. "You can't just make people disappear," Brooke protested. "No, your boyfriend has been doing exactly that for years." Wade checked Logan's bindings. "And I'm not making you disappear permanently, just long enough to implement consequences." Meanwhile, in town, Zoe sat in Dr. Wilson's office, unable to contain her anxiety any longer. "My dad is in trouble," she blurted. "Mom and her boyfriend are trying to kill him." Dr. Wilson set down her pen. "Zoe, that's a very serious accusation." "It's true. Dad knows about it. He said he had a plan, but what if something goes wrong? What if he can't stop them?" "Did your father tell you anything specific about this plan?" just that he was going to handle it, that I should trust him. Tears spilled down Zoe's cheeks. But there's a huge storm where they're camping. It's all over the news. What if? We need to call someone, Dr. Wilson decided, reaching for her phone. She hesitated. Is there anyone your father would trust? Any old friends? Zoe thought for a moment. There's someone he called last week. I heard him say the name Diego. Back in the wilderness, Wade forged a path through storm debris, keeping Logan secured in front of him while Brooke followed behind. He'd fashioned a harness system that allowed Logan limited movement while keeping him under control. Where exactly are we going? Brooke demanded after 3 hours of hiking. There's a ranger station about 8 miles northeast of here, Wade replied. Abandoned during budget cuts 5 years ago, but the structure should be intact. How could you possibly know that? Wade didn't answer, focused on navigating the treacherous terrain. They reached the abandoned station by mid-afternoon. The small cabin was dusty but provided shelter. While securing their position, Wade discovered something in a back storage room, a woman's backpack, partially hidden under debris. Inside, he found a wallet with ID. Catherine Mills, age 28, reported missing in these woods 6 months earlier. The last person seen with her, Logan Blackwood, who had reported her missing after she wandered off trail. Wade brought the backpack out. Logan's face darkened at the sight. Were you ever going to tell the authorities where to find her body? Wade asked. I don't know what you're talking about, Logan replied, but his eyes betrayed him. Brooke looked from the backpack to Logan, genuine horror dawning on her face. Logan, what is this? Your taste in men needs work, Brooke, Wade said quietly. First me, then a serial killer. Let's hope third time's the charm. In town, the search operation had mobilized. Storm damage had delayed efforts, but as weather cleared, helicopters scanned designated search areas, all miles from where Wade, Brooke, and Logan actually were. Hammond Reeves stood at the command post, studying maps with search and rescue teams. The last confirmed location was here. The team leader pointed to a mark on the map. The family next to their campsite said the father and mother went hiking with another camper, heading south toward Elk Ridge. Reeves frowned. That doesn't make sense. The permit application clearly showed they'd be camping here, on the north side of the valley. The team leader shrugged. Maybe they changed plans. Maybe, Reeves murmured, noting the discrepancy. A man in civilian clothes approached the command post. Excuse me, I'm looking for information about Wade Thorne. I'm a friend from out of town. Reeves sized up the newcomer, military bearing, watchful eyes. And you are? Diego Reyes. Wade and I served together. Understanding passed between the men. Reeves drew Diego aside. Something's not adding up with this search, Reeves said quietly. The reported hiking direction doesn't match Thorne's filed plans. Diego's expression revealed nothing. Wade was always meticulous about planning. If he filed north, he went north. Unless someone wanted him to go a different direction, Reeves suggested. Back at the abandoned ranger station, Wade had established a perimeter and created a makeshift radio from components in his pack, attempting to pick up emergency frequencies. Where'd you learn to do that? Brooke asked, watching him work. The same place I learned to track, to survive in hostile environments, and to identify threats, Wade replied without looking up. The life I had before I met you. You never told me. You never asked. You were so focused on who you wanted me to be that you never bothered to learn who I was. Logan sat against the wall, seemingly resigned to his captivity. You know this changes nothing, right? Even with that recording, it's your word against mine. I've beaten investigations before. Wade connected 2 wires, and static crackled from the small speaker. Not this time. On the 3rd day of their wilderness ordeal, they encountered other hikers, a group of 4 backpackers who had diverted from their route due to storm damage. Thank God, one exclaimed upon seeing them. Are you folks lost too? Wade, who had temporarily unbound Logan, stepped forward with a warm smile. Just weathering the storm. Our camp got washed out. We heard there's a search for missing hikers, another backpacker said. A family and another man. That's terrible, Wade said, shaking his head. We haven't seen anyone else out here. Have you? Brooke opened her mouth, but Logan's subtle head shake stopped her. Wade had made the stakes clear. Say anything, and all the evidence, the recordings, the backpack, everything, would immediately go public. The hikers offered to guide them to the nearest ranger station with radio contact. Wade graciously accepted, maintaining the facade of three friends on an unfortunate but manageable adventure. As they hiked with their rescuers, Brooke whispered to Wade, "What happens when we get back to civilization?" "Justice," Wade replied simply. Meanwhile, Reeves and Diego had broken away from the main search party, following subtle signs that only trained eyes would notice. Broken branches at precise heights, small stone arrangements pointing north rather than south. "He's leaving a trail," Diego confirmed. "But not for the regular search teams." "For who then?" Diego smiled grimly. "For someone who knows how to read it." At the operational ranger station, Wade, Brooke, and Logan were welcomed as lucky survivors. Medical staff checked them over while rangers took their information. "We'll need to interview you separately about what happened out there," a ranger told them. "Of course," Wade agreed pleasantly. "But first, may I use a phone? My daughter must be worried sick." In a private room, Wade made 2 calls. The first to Dr. Wilson's office, confirming Zoe was safe. The second to a number only he and Diego knew. "It's done," he said simply. "Implement the final phase." Within hours, the carefully orchestrated endgame began unfolding. Wildlife Officer Reeves arrived at the ranger station with recovered evidence from Logan's property, directly connecting him to the poaching operation. More damning was what they found near the abandoned ranger station: Catherine Mills' remains, along with physical evidence tying Logan to the scene. "We've been building this case for months," Reeves explained to the stunned rangers. "Mr. Blackwood has been a person of interest in multiple investigations." Meanwhile, Diego had delivered Wade's evidence package to authorities: recordings, financial documentation, and testimony from previous investigations that had been suppressed through Logan's connections. When Logan was formally questioned, he attempted to bargain using classified information about Wade's military past. The threat backfired spectacularly when Diego produced documentation showing Logan had sold intelligence during the Brazil operation, directly resulting in the deaths of American soldiers. By evening, Logan was in custody, facing multiple charges from murder to treason. 6 months later, Wade sat in his lawyer's office as the final divorce papers were signed. The settlement had been brutal for Brooke, without sufficient evidence for criminal charges related to the murder plot. Prosecutors had focused on Logan. But the evidence of her affair, combined with the suspicious insurance policies and Wade's recordings of her involvement in the planning stages, had devastated her case. "She gets nothing?" Wade asked, reviewing the documents. His lawyer nodded. "The house, investments, even her photography business equipment, all assets acquired during the marriage, stay with you." The judge was particularly influenced by the fact that she used the business as cover for the affair. "In custody?" "Full legal and physical custody of Zoe, with supervised visitation for Brooke at your discretion." Wade signed the papers, a chapter closing. Outside, Zoe waited in the car with Diego, who had remained a steady presence during the tumultuous months following the wilderness incident. Logan's trial had been swift and comprehensive. With Wade's testimony about the military intelligence breach added to the murder charges, he received multiple life sentences without possibility of parole. "You okay, Dad?" Zoe asked as Wade slid into the driver's seat. "I am," he said, surprised to find it true. "Ready for the new place?" Their new home sat on 5 acres outside town, room for the wilderness survival school Wade had established for veterans transitioning to civilian life. Using his long-suppressed skills to help others had brought an unexpected peace. Dr. Wilson had helped both Wade and Zoe process the trauma, encouraging healthy communication about Wade's military past and the events in Wyoming. Slowly, the nightmares that had plagued him for years began to fade. 3 weeks later, Wade received a call from Reeves. "Thought you'd want to know. We found evidence connecting Blackwood to 2 more missing hikers from last year. Cold cases finally closed." "Good," Wade said simply. "Their families deserved answers." "The FBI agent mentioned something interesting," Reeves continued. "Said your techniques for creating and preserving evidence in wilderness conditions were textbook perfect. Almost like you'd written the textbook." Wade smiled slightly. "Imagine that." After hanging up, Wade watched through the window as Zoe practiced the fire-starting technique he'd taught her that morning. She'd taken to their new life with remarkable resilience, finding strength in understanding rather than fearing the wilderness. Across town, Brooke stood behind the counter of a discount department store, arranging merchandise displays. Her photography career had collapsed when Wade's evidence revealed she'd been using client meetings as cover for the affair. Former friends and clients had distanced themselves, leaving her isolated and starting over with minimum wage work. When her shift ended, she returned to her small studio apartment to find a package waiting at her door. Inside was a vial, the same one she had planned to use on Wade's coffee, with a simple note, "Some wilderness we create ourselves." She stared at the vial, understanding the message. Wade wouldn't destroy her legally or physically, but he would never let her forget what she had attempted to do. The wilderness of consequences was hers to navigate alone. Back at their new home, Wade and Zoe sat on the porch watching the sunset over the mountains. "Dad," Zoe asked quietly, "are you still angry about what happened?" Wade considered the question carefully. Not angry, sad that it happened, but grateful for what it taught us both. About survival? About living authentically, Wade corrected. The wilderness doesn't care who you pretend to be. Neither does life. As darkness fell, Wade pointed out constellations to his daughter, no longer hiding the knowledge he'd gained during nights spent navigating by stars in distant jungles. For the first time in years, he felt no need to conceal who he was, the accountant and the warrior, the father and the survivor, all parts of the same whole. The wilderness had claimed its victim after all, not Wade's life, but the deception that had surrounded it. In its place grew something stronger, a truth as enduring as the mountains themselves. Epilogue. 15 years later. The morning air carried a familiar crispness that Wade Thorne had come to anticipate with the changing seasons. At 58, the silver at his temples had spread throughout his hair, and fine lines framed his eyes, markers of a life lived fully rather than signs of decay. He stood on the elevated observation deck of the main lodge, surveying the sprawling 30-acre complex that had grown from humble beginnings on a 5-acre plot of land. Thorne Wilderness Academy now occupied a significant footprint in the Colorado foothills, with 6 cabins, 3 training courses, and a central lodge where veterans and law enforcement personnel came to learn survival skills. What had begun as a small operation with Wade as the sole instructor had expanded into one of the most respected wilderness training facilities in the country. "Morning, boss," Diego called, ascending the wooden stairs to join him. Despite being in his early 60s, Diego Reyes moved with the same fluid precision that had made him an exceptional soldier. The years had weathered his face but strengthened their friendship. After helping Wade through the darkest period of his life, Diego had eventually joined the academy as chief security consultant and tactical instructor. "Thinking about the expansion again?" Diego asked, handing Wade a steaming mug of coffee. "Just appreciating how far we've come," Wade replied, accepting the coffee. "First class of the new program starts today." The new program, specifically designed for survivors of domestic violence and abuse, represented a direction Wade had contemplated for years, teaching people not just how to survive in the wilderness, but how to reclaim their sense of self-reliance and confidence after trauma. "Zoe's flight lands at 10, Diego noted. "Want me to pick her up?" "I'll go," Wade said. "Need the time to catch up before the ceremony." The ceremony. After 15 years of quiet growth, the academy was finally receiving formal recognition from the governor, a commendation for its work with veterans and its new initiatives for survivors. The event would bring media attention that Wade had historically avoided, but Zoe had convinced him it was time to embrace a more public role. Back in his office, Wade reviewed the day's schedule while a news segment played softly on the television mounted on the wall. A familiar face appeared on screen, his daughter, now 29, discussing her latest research findings. Dr. Zoe Thorne had become a respected psychologist specializing in trauma recovery and wilderness therapy, her work directly influenced by her own experiences. The integration of controlled wilderness exposure with conventional therapy techniques has shown remarkable efficacy, Zoe was saying. Our latest study demonstrates significant improvement in PTSD symptoms after just 8 weeks in the program. Pride swelled in Wade's chest. The frightened 14-year-old who had once brought him tearful warnings of his wife's betrayal had transformed her trauma into purpose. She'd followed a path adjacent to, but distinct from his own, using psychology rather than physical skills to help others heal. The news segment ended, and Wade turned off the television. His office walls told the story of the years since Wyoming. Photographs of graduating classes, certificates of recognition, and news clippings about the Academy's success. Centered above his desk was a framed motto: "The wilderness doesn't care who you pretend to be." Those words had become the foundation of everything he built afterward. The Denver International Airport bustled with its usual activity as Wade waited at the arrivals gate. He spotted Zoe immediately, her confident stride mirroring his own, professional attire softened by the backpack slung over one shoulder. "Dad," she called, quickening her pace to embrace him. At 29, Zoe had grown into a striking woman with her father's sharp intellect and a resilience forged through adversity. "How was Boston?" Wade asked, taking her luggage. "Productive. The conference panel went well, and Harvard is interested in collaborating on the next phase of research." She matched his stride as they headed toward the parking garage. "How's prep for the ceremony?" "Under control. Diego's handling security, the governor's staff has confirmed, and reservations are at capacity." Zoe nudged his shoulder playfully, still uncomfortable with recognition after all these years. "Old habits," Wade admitted as they reached his truck. "Spent too long staying under the radar." The drive from Denver to the Academy took them through increasingly rural landscapes. Zoe gazed out the window, her expression reflective. "I saw something about Logan on the news yesterday," she said after a while. Wade's hands tightened momentarily on the steering wheel. "Another appeal denied? His health is failing. Terminal cancer, apparently." Zoe turned to study her father's face. "Does that bring you any satisfaction?" Wade considered the question carefully. "No. Justice was served when he went to prison. His suffering now adds nothing to that." "Very zen of you," Zoe remarked with a small smile. "Not zen. Practical. Carrying anger is exhausting." They drove in comfortable silence for several miles before Zoe spoke again. "I visited Mom last month." Wade nodded, unsurprised. Zoe had maintained cautious contact with Brooke over the years, against Wade's initial reservations, but ultimately with his blessing. "How is she?" he asked, his voice neutral. "Better than before. The assisted living facility is good for her. Her physical therapy is showing results." Zoe hesitated. The stroke took a lot from her, but her mind is still sharp. The mention of Brooke's stroke, 3 years earlier at age 52, brought conflicting emotions for Wade. The woman who had once plotted his death was now partially paralyzed, dependent on others for basic needs. There was no satisfaction in that outcome, only a somber acknowledgement of life's unpredictable trajectories. "She asked about you," Zoe added carefully. "What did you tell her?" "The truth. They're doing well. That the Academy has grown." Zoe paused. "She cried when I mentioned the governor's commendation." Wade didn't respond immediately. After the divorce, Brooke had struggled for years, moving between minimum wage jobs. Eventually, she'd found work as an administrative assistant at a small community college, rebuilt some semblance of stability, and even completed a degree in education. She had never remarried. The stroke had derailed her hard-won recovery, leaving her dependent on disability benefits and support from her sister. "Does she need anything?" Wade asked finally. "No. Shannon manages her finances well." Zoe hesitated. "But I think she'd like to hear from you." After all this time, Wade's expression remained unreadable. "I'll think about it." As they crested the final hill before the Academy grounds came into view, Zoe gasped softly. The expansion had occurred gradually during her academic years in Boston, and seeing the full scale of it now clearly impressed her. "Dad, this is incredible." Below them sprawled the results of 15 years of determined work. Training courses running through forests and meadows, cabins arranged in a semicircle around the central lodge, and a new therapy center with its glass walls reflecting the mountain backdrop. It grew a bit while you were getting those fancy degrees, Wade said with understated pride. A bit? It's practically a village now. As they approached the main entrance, a familiar figure stood waiting. Hammond Reeves, now in his late 60s, had retired from wildlife conservation 5 years earlier to join Wade's academy as an environmental education coordinator. The prodigal daughter returns, Reeves called with a broad smile. Just in time. We've got journalists arriving in 2 hours for preliminary interviews. Journalists? Wade raised an eyebrow. Not just local press this time, Reeves confirmed. National outlets picked up the story after the governor's office issued that press release. Wade's expression tightened. I agreed to modest coverage, not a media circus. Too late. Diego's voice came from behind as he approached from a lodge. Once they connected the dots between Thorn Wilderness Academy and the Wyoming Wilderness case, interest spiked. 15-year anniversary of a story that made national headlines tends to do that. Wade sighed. The events in Wyoming had become something of a true crime sensation over the years. The accountant with a secret military past who outwitted his would-be killers in the wilderness. Despite his preference for privacy, the story had periodically resurfaced in documentaries and podcasts. We should get inside, Zoe suggested, sensing her father's discomfort. I want to see the new therapy center before the circus begins. The therapy center represented the culmination of Wade and Zoe's collaborative vision, combining his practical wilderness knowledge with her psychological expertise. Built last year with grant funding, its design incorporated indoor and outdoor therapy spaces, specialized equipment for physical rehabilitation, and accommodation for extended residential programs. The first survivors group starts next month, Zoe asked as they toured the facility. 20 participants confirmed, Wade replied. Mix of domestic violence survivors and people recovering from other forms of trauma. And Dr. Wilson is heading the clinical side? Wade nodded, semi-retired, but couldn't resist the project. Says it brings her career full circle. Dr. Amara Wilson had remained connected to the Thorn family throughout the years, providing therapy for both Wade and Zoe after Wyoming. Now in her 70s, she had accepted the position of clinical director for the new program, overseeing the therapeutic aspects while Wade handled the survival and self-reliance components. As they completed their tour, Wade's phone buzzed, a text message from an unlisted number. He frowned at the screen. Everything okay? Zoe asked. Not sure. Wade showed her the message. Need to speak with you regarding LB urgent development. Special Agent Carter, FBI. Logan. Zoe's brow furrowed. What could be urgent after 15 years? Only one way to find out. Wade returned the call immediately, stepping outside for privacy. The conversation lasted less than 5 minutes, but when he returned, his expression had grown serious. Logan Blackwood was found dead in his cell this morning, he told Zoe and Diego, who had joined them. Apparent suicide, though they're investigating. Suicide? Diego's eyes narrowed. With terminal cancer and no chance of parole? Seems convenient. That's not all, Wade continued. He left a detailed confession implicating 3 other people in unsolved murders dating back 20 years. Cases that were never connected to him. His final act, Zoe murmured, making sure his name stays in the headlines even after death. They're sending an agent to brief me tomorrow, Wade added. Apparently, one of the implicated individuals worked at the prison and may have assisted with the suicide in exchange for being excluded from the confession. The news cast a momentary shadow over their preparations, a reminder that the past was never fully contained. Wade checked his watch. We should prepare for the interviews. First crew arrives in 30 minutes. Are you going to mention Logan's death? Diego asked. Wade shook his head. Not unless they bring it up. Today is about the Academy's future, not its origins. The day progressed with surprising smoothness. Wade, typically reserved with media, found himself speaking passionately about the Academy's mission. Zoe handled questions about the psychological aspects of their programs, while Diego and Reeves addressed security and environmental components respectively. By late afternoon, the governor's motorcade arrived. The formal ceremony would begin in an hour, with approximately 200 guests in attendance. Veterans who had completed the program, law enforcement partners, donors, and community supporters. As Wade changed into his suit for the ceremony, his phone buzzed again. Another text message. This one from Shannon, Brooke's sister. Brooke watching ceremony livestream today. Wanted you to know she's proud of what you've built. S. He stared at the message for a long moment before setting the phone aside without replying. 15 years had dulled the sharp edges of betrayal, but some wounds merely scarred rather than healed completely. A knock at his cabin door interrupted his thoughts. Come in, he called. Zoe entered, elegant in a simple dark blue dress. Everyone's gathering. You ready? Almost. Wade adjusted his tie, the one Zoe had given him for his 50th birthday, adorned with subtle compass designs. I've been thinking, Zoe said, watching him, about what you always taught me about wilderness survival. Which part? That surviving isn't the ultimate goal. It's what you do after survival that matters. She smiled softly. You've done something remarkable with your second chance, Dad. Wade turned from the mirror to face her. We both have. The ceremony itself exceeded even the governor's office's expectations. The commendation praised the Academy's 15 years of service to veterans, its newer programs for first responders, and the innovative Survivors program about to launch. When Wade rose to accept the award, the standing ovation lasted nearly a minute. At the podium, he spoke briefly but meaningfully about transformation, how wilderness stripped away pretense and forced people to confront their true selves. 15 years ago, circumstances forced me to reclaim skills I thought I'd left behind forever, he said, careful not to directly reference the events in Wyoming. What began as a necessity became a calling. This academy exists because I believe everyone deserves the chance to discover their true capabilities, especially those who survive their own wilderness experiences, whether literal or metaphorical. Later, as guests mingled during the reception, Wade stepped outside for a moment of quiet. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant orange and purple hues. Diego joined him, 2 glasses of whiskey in hand. To surviving the spotlight, he said, offering one to Wade. Wade accepted with a nod of thanks. To survival in all its forms. They drank in companionable silence, watching the colors deepen across the horizon. Got word from my contact at the Bureau, Diego said after a while. Logan's confession mentioned 4 more victims than they initially thought. Cold cases they never connected to him. Wade absorbed this information with a grim expression. Some predators never stop, even from behind bars. Makes me wonder if we could have prevented more deaths if you'd handled things differently in Wyoming. By killing him, you mean? Wade's voice held no judgment, only reflection. The thought crossed my mind at the time, Diego admitted. Would have been easy to stage in those conditions. And I'd be no better than him. Wade shook his head. Justice was never going to be perfect, but it had to be justice, not revenge. Inside the lodge, the celebration continued. Through the windows, Wade could see Zoe deep in conversation with the governor, likely advocating for additional funding for trauma recovery programs. Dr. Wilson sat with a group of veterans, her age diminished by the animation in her gestures as she explained a concept. Reeves was showing photographs of wildlife to interested guests. You built something good here, Diego observed, following Wade's gaze. Out of something terrible. We all did, Wade corrected. Everyone who stayed. The next morning, Wade rose before dawn, as was his habit. The ceremony had concluded late, but decades of military discipline had permanently altered his relationship with sleep. He dressed in hiking clothes and set out on a familiar trail that wound up to a ridgeline overlooking the academy. The pre-dawn air was cool and still. Wade moved silently through the forest, his footsteps barely disturbing the pine needles underfoot. Age had done little to diminish his woodcraft. If anything, years of teaching had refined his techniques to their essential elements. At the ridge, he paused to watch the first light touch the distant peaks. This daily ritual had become a form of meditation, a moment to center himself before the day's demands. His phone vibrated in his pocket. Normally, he wouldn't check it during these morning hikes, but given yesterday's unexpected developments, he made an exception. A text from Zoe, breakfast with Dr. Wilson at 8. She wants to discuss integrating her new research into the Survivors program. Also, reporter for National Geographic arriving at 9 for that feature we discussed. Wade typed a quick acknowledgement, then noticed a second message that had arrived during the ceremony but gone unread from Shannon's number, but clearly relaying Brooks' words. Wade, I watch everything you've built from afar. The Academy, your relationship with Zoe, the lives you've changed. I can never undo what I plan to do, but I want you to know that I understand now what I couldn't see then. The man you truly were beneath the quiet exterior. Congratulations on the commendation. It's well-deserved. B. Wade stared at the screen, complex emotions surfacing. 15 years was both an eternity and the blink of an eye. The anger had faded to a dull ache long ago, replaced by something more nuanced. Neither forgiveness nor resentment, but acknowledgement of a shared history permanently altered by betrayal. After several minutes, he typed a response, the first direct communication he'd initiated with Brooke in over a decade. Thank you. I hope your recovery continues to progress. Wade. Simple, restrained, but breaking a silence that had perhaps lasted too long. As the sun cleared the mountain ridge, Wade pocketed his phone and began his descent back to the Academy. From this elevation, he could see vehicles already arriving, staff preparing for the day, the FBI agent coming to discuss Logan's confession, the National Geographic team ready to document the Academy's work. The past would always remain present in some form. In Logan's posthumous confessions, in Brooks' stroke-slowed speech, in the nightmares that occasionally still visited Wade's sleep. But its power to define had diminished with each passing year. Each new student who found strength in the wilderness, each survivor who reclaimed their sense of self. Wade paused at a clearing that offered a perfect view of the Academy grounds. 15 years earlier, he had stood on another overlook, watching a camp where his wife and her lover planned his death. The contrast between then and now struck him with particular clarity this morning. The wilderness had claimed its victims over the years, Logan to cancer and prison walls, Brooke to the consequences of her choices and later her failing health. But it had also offered redemption to others, to Wade himself, to Zoe, to the thousands of veterans and survivors who had passed through the Academy's programs. At 58, Wade Thorne understood better than most that survival was merely the beginning. What mattered was what came after, the life built from the lessons of the wilderness, whether that wilderness was literal or one of human creation. He continued down the trail as the Academy came fully alive below him, ready for whatever the day might bring, and carrying the past not as a burden, but as the foundation for everything that followed. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen, and I'll see you there.